Hi everyone, my name's Mark Deere, and in this video I wanted to talk about being an amateur versus being a professional. It's funny because there's a thing that I've always done, like when I was younger especially, where I would want to be professional more quickly than I should have been. You know, like I needed to, looking back, I should probably have spent more time focusing on having fun doing something and giving myself permission to be bad at it rather than trying to instantly be good. Now, this is a perfectionist tendency, and I've talked about that in another video. But I think because of that, and maybe this is something that attracts a lot of people, but because of that, whenever I would take on anything, I mean, I'd put in a lot of time early on, really fast, and when I decided I was good at something or wanted to be good at something, I'd work really hard and try to be professional straight away. When I was in high school, I started playing guitar, and rather than spending a long time being allowed to be crap, like I got straight into bands. And don't get me wrong, I probably learned more quickly by being in bands, and I tried to be as good as possible, as quick as possible. And then, you know, I was in a few bands, but then rather than playing in covers, we always did originals because we're like, well, we can then be professional. And then I got in a real band and we got a residency, and, you know, we were professional because we were getting paid, even if we got paid in beers more than we got paid in you know, actual money. And then it was the same thing with my game company. Like after that, at uni I was studying game development, so among other things, like a bunch of digital stuff, but I ended up kind of focusing on games, had a game company, rather than just making a bunch of games for fun, you know, instantly had a company, registered with Sony Europe. And again, it took me up faster because I was trying to be professional quicker. Now, it's funny because, again, if we'd made a bunch of experimental games, I probably would have learned quicker that I didn't really love games. But working on this one big game project was really exciting and interesting. So it kept me going, you know, until I got to the top of the game industry and realized I didn't love it. So then I got into making movies, and same sort of thing. Like, you know, Robert Rodriguez in his 10-minute film school famously said, like, you know, don't wait to be called a filmmaker. You are a filmmaker. Go print business cards. If you make films, you're a filmmaker. And it's funny because with films, we kind of made them just for fun originally, but we still always thought, even for our very first feature film, we didn't even make a short film first, our first feature film, we thought, well, this will be able to get into the Brisbane International Film Festival. That was our goal because we were, you know, from Brisbane, and they have an international film festival. We thought we'll get into that. And we never even applied for it in the end because the movie didn't turn out very good. But yeah, I mean, it never would have gotten in if we had have applied. But we always acted like professionals, you know, so we made our second film and then our third, and we kind of accepted after a while that our films weren't great. And I went and did a master's degree to kind of improve, but the view was to become professional, not to be an amateur, not to just enjoy it for its own sake. Now, it was when I was doing my master's that I started coming across a bunch of photographers, because when I did my master's degree in film, there was a lot of, you know, as part of your cinematography learning, you kind of take photos, and I met a bunch of professional photographers. And what makes a professional compared to an amateur? And photography is something where you really see the difference. And that is, if you're a professional, if you're getting paid, right? If you're working at a professional level. Whereas if you're an amateur, you're doing it just for the love of it, and there's no money necessarily involved, right? You're just doing it because you like pursuing that interest. And for some reason, like at that time, this is 2006-07, so, and maybe it's always been this way, and it has, because since then I've heard the same thing over and over from every professional photographer I meet, which is like, oh, you know, I went to the wedding and I shot photos, and there's like 3 people there, and they've got a $3,000 camera, and they think they're great, but they don't, you know, they're only taking 1 good photo for every 10. You know, 9 out of my 10 are good, whereas 1 out of their 10 are good. It's like, well, does that matter though? Like, they're having fun. They brought their camera because they own it. Like, the interest, like, professionals couldn't separate the fun, the thing that got them into it in the first place, from the professional side. And what I've found is, as soon as you make something professional, a lot of the time it stops being fun immediately. You know, like, I love playing in bands. As soon as I got in that real band, it stopped being fun, you know. Same exact thing with a game company. Like, long enough working on the game, I realized games weren't that fun for me. You know, ironically with film, I've never felt that way. I just love it. I fell for it, and I've stayed that way forever. But when I started working, so I was making TV ads, making corporate videos, that quickly got no fun. Don't get me wrong, I always love it. I love being behind camera. I love filming. But yeah, it certainly never gave me the joy that making narrative films did. But yeah, it was since becoming a teacher. So for 11 years, I worked in film professionally. And then the last 10 years, I've worked as a teacher, and I've just kind of given up full-time classroom teaching. But in the time as a teacher, I realized, like, oh wow, look, you know, I have a lot of professional skills because I've been paid to take photos, even though I've never considered myself a good photographer. I was a professional photographer because I got paid. I had a job for a while when we got married as a school photographer, so I would go from school to school all around the state taking photos of school kids, you know. And so I was getting paid to do it, but I didn't consider myself a very good photographer. It was a good way to learn photography though. And same as everything, I guess, when you try to be a professional, even if you're not very good at it, you're getting paid, and so you have to work to a certain level, right? But as a teacher, I learned like, oh, like I'm here teaching, and like teaching is the thing I need to be good at or get good at or whatever. But any other skills you have, like you're allowed to be an amateur. Like most teachers I meet are amateur, filmmakers or amateur, whatever they do, like amateur digital technologies people or robotics people or whatever, areas there were. Like, nobody's making any money on the side of their teaching gig, or most people, I should say. I'm sure there's plenty of people making money on the side. But yeah, and I realized, hey, why not embrace being an amateur? Because being an amateur means you have permission to be crap, which is what every beginner should have, right? I should make a video dedicated to being a beginner. Because when you're a beginner, how can you possibly expect to be as good as a professional? How can you possibly expect to be as good as an amateur who's been doing it 30 years, right? So, but beginners is different from being an amateur. Being an amateur is accepting, I'm doing this for the love of it. Whereas being a professional, so there are some people working at a professional level who love what they do. And they just, for whatever reason, maybe it's like me with film. Like I just found the thing that works for me. I love it. Making films is just the thing I love doing, right? And, getting to work at a professional level, getting paid for it is just a bonus, because somehow you figured out a way to make the thing that you have fun doing the thing you get paid to do. But I've also met people, I won't name them, but I've had meetings with people where they would refuse to, so we talked about writing and talked about, things with these people who are professionals, but they would say like, oh, I would, because we've been writing spec scripts for 20 years, like a spec, something on spec means you did it without any money. It was speculative in the hope that once it was finished, you could then sell it, right? So you write a spec script, and that means you write the script first, and then you take it around and say, does anyone want to pay money for this script to produce it, right? And so we were talking to different writers, and they'd be like, oh, I would never write anything on spec. Like I would not write one word until I know I'm being paid. So they'll do a pitch. They'll write like a 1-page outline or a treatment, a couple of page treatment, and they'll take that around. And until someone says, yeah, we'll pay you to develop this, right? Development is the thing. So then they get paid, then they'll write a script, right? So I think that's the difference between professional. Like there are people who are just sitting around never writing anything because they're a professional, and if they're not getting paid, they won't do it, right? And I think, well, yeah, I think this is where like a lot of people in the movie industry like are only in it because they're earning money from it. They would leave the movie industry. And I guess a lot of people just wouldn't work. I don't know. I've never been able to identify with that, because I would work no matter what. Like if I won $1 billion tomorrow, I'd still be making movies, right? But just because I like doing it. And I guess if they like fishing, like they're making movies because that's the business they're in, maybe they had a family member in it, or a friend got them in it, or it's just what they studied, so it's just what they made money off. Like I had a boss once, that was his whole thing. He's like, I studied it, so it's what I know how to make money off. I'd rather be in some other industry, like the food industry, but this is the industry I studied, and this is the industry I can earn the most money in. It's like, okay. I've met a lot of teachers like this too, who are like, show me another job where I can earn this much money and still get to do it. Like I can't, and I'm like, well, any job, right? But then they would have to retrain, and they don't want to retrain. They're comfortable working as a professional in that industry, even if they're not happy, even if it's just what they do for money. It's just what they do to derive income. It's not actually done for joy. Whereas being an amateur, you do it because you enjoy it. And because there are no stakes, there's no money involved. If you stop, say you're an amateur, remote control race car driver, you spend money on it, but you don't make money from it. And so you do it. And as soon as you go, you know what, I'm done with these cars, you can sell all your cars because it was just an interest. You don't use it to derive income. And so, yeah, to me, this year, I'm gonna really try to focus on being an amateur. I don't wanna be a professional filmmaker. I don't wanna go to Hollywood. I've talked about Joel Haver in a couple of my recent videos, but it's funny because to me, oh, someone's here. To me, interesting. He often says, like people say to him like, oh, you've had a lot of success on YouTube, so you could probably leverage that to get into Hollywood. And he's like, it's a stepping stone to Hollywood. And he says, no. This is the step that I want to be on. This is where I want to stop. Like I'm making my garden here. I'm not moving on to somewhere else. This is where I want to be. And I think that's the thing. I think just making films, and then worrying later, what comes of it, instead of thinking this has to make money. I'm only doing this if it'll make money. Like this is my profession, or I'm better than an amateur. This is the thing. I find a lot of amateurs have more talent than professionals, because being professional just means you're deriving income from it. It doesn't mean you're the best. It doesn't mean you're the most expert. Someone who's an amateur can be a bigger expert than the person who's a professional, right? So it's very interesting. But to me, I think there's magic in being an amateur. And I think a lot of amateurs don't get the praise they deserve, especially from other professionals. So anyway, that's pretty much it. What do you think? Do you think amateurs are, good or bad? If you're a photographer, I'd especially love to know, because it's the thing that so many people do. Anyway, good times. I'll talk to you guys in the next video, and have a good day.